Hello, and welcome to the Module 3 lecture, Tourism and Local Economies. This is one of the pillars of sustainable tourism, and we want to look at specifically today avoiding tourism leakage and keeping large amounts of money that is earned to stay local. And so, again, we're going to just review why this is even important in the first place. If we look at the amount of money that is being earned because of tourism, the 10% of gross domestic products, how many jobs are created, how much money is being exported because of tourism, the services that are being exported. This is what's contributing to the global economy. But where that money goes is what we're going to be discussing. Now, we know that tourism is likely to boom once again now that we're coming out of 2020 and moving into 2021, where people are aching to travel once again, especially. Once the COVID situation calms down. The forecast is that tourist arrivals are going to increase even more to 1.8 billion by 2030. And so that revenue is going to continue to come in via the tourism industry. And we've talked about why that is and the accessibility of tourism. But what we're really going to be focusing on is this concept of what tourism leakage is. And so if we look at what tourism leakage is, it's basically the distribution of tourist money, where it goes. And it really starts with just kind of looking at the total holiday expenses, where you look at things like airfare, insurance, taxes, online travel agencies. But expenses within the visited countries, that's what leads to expenses within the visited country. So if you look at things like visa fees, airport taxes, hotel chains, destination management, and expenses at the local destination, going even more into how that it affects the local destination. You look at foreign local lodging, um, uh, or non-local lodging, restaurants, tour leaders, tour guides, imported goods for tourists. And then the money benefits the local hotels, restaurants, produce and services. And in developing countries, it's not uncommon that over 90% of the tourism dollars that are spent by vacationing tourists leaks out of the actual travel destination. So it leaks out of the actual local travel destination, and then it can lead out of the country as well, which means that only 10% of the money spent by tourists will benefit the people of that local destination. And that's what we want to try to avoid. If we look at tourism in the developing countries, tourism is a major factor in the war on poverty for most developing countries. Countries that are in the development phase want to become more developed, like countries like the United States, European countries like England and France. And it's their largest single export and major driver of jobs, investment, and economic transformation. And so, because it's so huge, it's important for that money to stay in those destinations, but it's not. Out of each of the $100 spent by the United States on a vacation tour, from a developed country, not just the United States, but just in other developed countries, it has been estimated that only around $5 of those $100 actually stays in a developing country's destination's economy. That is pretty sad. Other more modest estimates of leakage include a study of Thailand in particular. This isn't as bad as that, but still 70% of all money spent by tourists ends up leaving Thailand. 80% of tourist money left in the Caribbean, and 40% left in or left India. So, India is not is in dire states as some other developing countries. It's considered one of those medium developed countries, but still the money is leaking out. And so we need to look at what we can do about this. An average of 50, according to the UNTWO in 2011, they estimated that an average of 55% of gross tourism revenue received by developing countries leaks out. And again, in some cases, that leakage can be as bad as 90%. How can tourists support local economies? We really aren't going to spend a whole lot of time on this lecture just because I'm telling you that the problem is that the money is not staying where the tourists go. It's leaking out mainly because of um, large businesses, hotel chains. Hiring people that are outside of the local community, mainly because they probably have more skills than people that are within that local community. And so there are ways that we can encourage the money to stay in those particular places. And so if we, as an industry, can encourage tourists to eat in a locally owned restaurant at least once during their stay, if we can encourage tourists to take a walking tour and using a local that knows a lot about the area to guide in each destination that they visit, buying souvenirs that are made by locals in their destination, that can all contribute to keeping the money where tourists go. And what our responsibility really is to provide options, working with locals and encouraging tourists to purchase from the locals. And so we can work with locals in providing advertising or encouraging locals to provide discounts or providing other kind of perks, and utilizing the locals instead of utilizing just the large corporate companies that are there. And so that's what this module really is about, is learning about different ways that we can encourage tourists to spend money locally so that money can stay locally. And you're going to be doing a further reading about possible solutions in providing locals to keep the money where tourists are spending it. And you'll be answering some questions on a quiz based on that reading. And one of your assignments is going to be to come up with some ideas about how to encourage and support local economies. Thank you so much for listening. And if you want to go back to the slideshow, it is available to you in the Module 3 folder. Feel free to go back to it as needed. Thanks so much.